and grab a cup of tea, or try to get some lunch snacks ready to go. Nice to see some familiar faces out there. So as we get going, and as folks sign on, go ahead and use that chat function to write your name, where you're calling in from, and any collaboratives you're involved with. And we're going to be trying to use the chat throughout the webinar just to keep the conversation going. It's also a great place to pose questions that we'll be doing. Welcome, Rhonda. Ron was on super early. All right. Welcome, Steve and Garrett and Ben. Ara, good to see you. All right. This is a pretty good collection. I'm trying to think of who's going to come out what's our geographic diversity going to look like here. All right, and again, as folks join us, we'll get going in just a minute. Go ahead and write down in the chat where you're calling from and collaboratives that you might be involved with, and that'd be great. We'll wait another minute or two, so it's still time to grab your tea. All right, so this is great. Welcome, Diane. Hannah, good to see you. Liz, good to see you. Lynn Oliver's in the house. This is great. Tyson, welcome. Randy, good to see you. Luis and Britt, Jim, good to have you here. All right, this is a pretty good group, and I'll just start off, kick things off there, and just give a shout out to to Elizabeth Spalding, who is managing all this behind the scenes. She's with the Langdon Group, and she helps facilitate the Boise Forest Coalition and is a member of the Idaho Forest Restoration Partnership, helping us on the advisory group there. And also Diane Olson, also with the Langdon Group, works with collaboratives in East Idaho. So nice to have the Langdon Group well represented here. And we've got folks from the region as well. This is great. Welcome, Danny. Really good to have folks here. And I can go ahead and kind of get started. I'm super excited about being here today. And again, as folks call in, go ahead and we'll use the chat to get some instructions going and have a dialogue and questions there. And one of the things that I wanted to just talk a little bit about is the how we can use webinars like these to stay connected and to promote some cross-pollination between collaborative groups. What I found is that collaboratives kind of usually do a deep dive into a particular issue and often forget that there's another collaborative, maybe in the next forest over, that might be struggling with similar things. And so when developing this idea, we're like, boy, it'd be nice to have some folks together who kind of have work with these issues a lot and maybe to have some cross-pollination of ideas. This is also a, this panel was going to be part of our Idaho Forest Restoration conference this spring. That went remote, as everything else has. And so we decided to host this conference discussion, this webinar for later. And so it is now later. And Tim, good to see you. Welcome, welcome. It's good to have folks from Montana in the house here. So I'll go ahead and get started. I think we've got enough folks here to kind of kick things off. And again, I'm John Robison, and today I'm going to be representing both the Idaho Conservation League and the Idaho Forest Restoration Partnership. And again, use the chat as we keep going. This is really a chance to hear from some experts in collaboration and also to have a dialogue amongst ourselves. So one of the things I wanted to just talk about was forest collaboration in Idaho. And I'm going to go ahead and see if I can share my screen. And this is usually where I get kicked out of the webinar, and talk a little bit about some of the issues there. So what we have is, this is the IFRP website. And again, Idaho Forest Restoration Partnership. And here's a map index of Idaho's collaborative groups. And so you can see that we've got diversity across Idaho, and every forest has a collaborative somewhere in those boundaries working on things. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that collaboratives are going to play an increasingly important role moving ahead, where this is a map from the Idaho Department of Land's website. And this shows Idaho's shared stewardship priority landscapes. So we've got just over 2 million acre priority landscape in the north, 2.2 million acre landscape in the south. You can see these focal areas in here where folks are going to be really rolling up their sleeves and working on this cross-boundary work. And one of the things that's really important about these efforts is that it looks like each project area is associated with a collaborative forest landscape restoration project. So that will help fund some of the work happening on the forest side of things. And we got word this summer that those two project areas, those two CFLR projects, are in the top 10 list for future funding. So it sounds like there'll be some gas in the tank to work on these projects. So the shared stewardship agreement, the partnership between the Forest Service and the state of Idaho, envisioned not just working within these priority areas, that was one key goal, but also to double the acres treated across national forests in Idaho. So that means that even if you're not within, or your collaborative doesn't work within one of these priority areas, and it works out here on the Salmon Chalice, or the Nez Clear, the Caribou Targhee, or the Sawtooth, that there's still work to be done out there, and collaboratives may be playing an increasingly important role in that work. So I wanted to go ahead and highlight that and talk about the value of the importance of collaboratives moving forward. A couple of things I wanted to mention and talk about our speakers here in a second. So one of the things, as there's going to be more and more, I think, opportunities for collaboratives to get involved, particularly on this all hands, all lands approach. We and all these collaboratives are working to make the forest more resistant to change, more resilient. One of the things is, how do we actually do that internally for our collaboratives? How do we make sure our collaboratives are functioning as best they can? And again, people kind of get in their own silos in there, but there's a number of organizations that support collaboratives, offer all types of resources for them. And so the assistance can include facilitation, coaching, templates for decision-making protocols, and that type of kind of structural support that can be really important to have a functional collaborative. So today's panel, super excited about this. So I'm going to be talking about the Idaho Forest Restoration Partnership, and logistical support is being provided by the Langdon Group and Elizabeth Spalding. We also have Ben Irie, who's the Conservation Connect Program Manager for the National Forest Foundation, Tyson Bertoni-Riggs, the Policy Analyst for the Rural Voices for Conservation Coalition, and Sally Bernstein, the Forest Program Coordinator for Sustainable Northwest. So I wanted just to kickstart and mention IFRP, again, the Idaho Forest Restoration Partnership, quickly, and talk about the support network that this collaborative group provides. And again, I'm John Robinson. I've been working on public lands issues for the Idaho Conservation League since 2002, and I serve on both the Idaho Forest Restoration Partnership and the Payette Forest Coalition. Now, the IFRP formed in 2010 in order to connect, inform, and support collaborative groups working to restore the resilience of Idaho's forest. The partnership is a coalition of organizations and individuals from both industry and conservation. The Society of American Foresters, Snake River chapter, serves as the fiscal agent. And I wanted to go ahead and share my screen real quick here again and talk a little bit about IFRP. And this is our website over here. And so on this website, we again talk about the role that we're playing in supporting collaboratives. So we're not trying to direct and tell what collaboratives do. We're just trying to support their mission out there. So we've got, again, inform, connect, and support. We also advocate on behalf of collaborative forest restoration policies. So in the last 10 years, we've hosted an annual conference. Of course, we're gone virtual now, but I wanted to share something with you. And that is the fact that we actually have a library online that's available, and it has our reference library from past conferences, concert videos. We've got a webinar we hosted in October on the Great American Outdoors Act. We've hosted webinars on developing a citizen science program, on forest economics, and some of our previous conferences are posted there. So this is a resource if you're interested in citizen science or things like that. This webinar is being recorded too, thanks to Elizabeth. So this is just one resource as well about IFRP. We're mainly about an annual conference, which is now being broken down to a series of webinars. So I wanted to go ahead and invite folks. This is kind of a call to action, the first call to action of the webinar, to go ahead and, as we're developing our agenda for this next year, we're open to ideas. So if there's a particular issue that your collaborative you could use help with, please put that in the chat. And so we'll capture that and discuss that at the next IFRP meeting. The other thing I wanted to invite folks to, if you haven't already, you can go to our, again, our home site, and you go to e-news here. And we've got our webinar right here. And then if you go down here to like this, subscribe by email. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and go here to our website, sign up. And this is a good way to stay informed on upcoming conferences, things like that. We don't send out a ton of emails, but it's an important role there. The other thing that we've been doing, and folks have probably been involved with, IFRP also recently conducted a survey to evaluate how well state and federal partners are working together on shared stewardship, on cross-boundary work, and what the limiting factors might be. And we're expecting to conduct this survey annually to help track progress in shared stewardship and developing relationships over time. So again, just the call to action on IFRP is to go ahead, and if you have ideas of a hot topic you'd love to see us address in a webinar, go ahead to our website and take a look at that. Now, I'm really excited to have Ben Irie join us, and he's going to be our next speaker. And Ben joined the National Forest Foundation in April of 2017 to be part of their learning networks serving community-based groups and forest service collaboratives involved in stewardship activities. Ben conducts web-based peer learning sessions, maintains an online library of best practices and tools, convenes in-person workshops, and facilitates collaborative groups. And Ben holds an undergraduate degree in resource conservation from the University of Montana and worked for the Forest Service on trail crews and as a wilderness ranger before returning to Missoula to complete his graduate degree. And so I'm going to ask Ben to go ahead and share his screen, and we can go ahead and have Ben give a little overview of his work with the National Forest Foundation, and then we'll go on to the other panelists. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it on to Ben.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Ben.
Great.
And
Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep, looks good.
So I'm just going to run through our website, talk to you a little bit about the National Forest Foundation, and then some of the collaborative support that we engage in. So here's just our Who Are We page, and you'll see here at the top, we are a congressionally chartered nonprofit at the National Forest Foundation. We were created with a simple mission to bring people together to restore and enhance our national forests and grasslands. And as a reminder, this website is National Forests, and that's forest is plural, .org. So within the National Forest Foundation, I work in the Conservation Connect department, and we've got a little collaboration resources webpage here and an overview of Conservation Connect. As John said, we do a lot of peer-to-peer learning, collaborative facilitation, workshop design, things like that. So for instance, in the facilitation and collaborative assistance realm, we do some, help collaborative groups design collaborative processes, stand up collaborative groups, facilitate longstanding groups. I currently facilitate the Beaverhead Deer Lodge Working Group and the Panhandle Forest Collaborative, and others in Conservation Connect facilitate other collaborative groups across the country. We work here's a bunch of the groups that we work with. This list might need a little bit of updating. We even do some housing of collaborative groups' websites. For instance, I'll just click on the Panhandle Forest Collaborative here, and you can see the vision of the group, et cetera, members, current members, and then meeting records and other meeting documents here. So getting back, we also maintain an online library of collaboration tools and best practices. So I'll quickly take you to our kind of tool search function here. When I'm here, when I'm navigating this site and using this tool search, one of the handiest things for getting all the collaborative resources together is just to search for Collaborat. So I get collaboration, collaborative, everything in there. And then I just get a laundry list of tools here. So these tools will include our peer learning sessions, any sort of documents that we have on best practices, et cetera. Just to highlight a couple of the tools here, so you can see we've got something here on how to facilitate public decisions. I'll just click on that tool briefly. And this takes us, actually is a link, cross-posting link to this excellent website out of the University of Michigan on collaborative processes. They're more focused on, I think, marine-based collaboration. Excuse me. But this is a very powerful tool for if you're trying to get up to speed on collaborative facilitation and how to run an effective collaborative group, they've got a series of well, documents that you just kind of walk your way through here in a tutorial fashion. And then somewhere along the line here, they've just got this wonderful series of short videos kind of explaining the collaborative process and collaborative facilitation. So that's just one example of a tool that we've got on our website. You know, how to establish collaborative governance documents, how to run meetings, et cetera, all in here. As, like I said, as well, we've got our, bear with me one sec. We've got our peer learning sessions in there as well. Let me just back out of here. So for peer learning sessions, you can also use that same tool search. And we've got peer learning sessions with the National Partnership Office over the last, probably 6 or 7 years. And all of those sessions are in our database here, and you can watch the videos, this tool search to just pull up the peer learning sessions. So Partnership 101, Tribal Relations and Partnership, case study of the Denver Water Partnership, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's probably upwards of 50 partnership related sessions in here right now. And we've also been doing peer learning sessions with, related to CFLRP. So collaborative. So you can pull all those up. Session on socioeconomic monitoring. Well, this one didn't actually get that many, but there should be a lot more. Oops, I got still a partnership in there. So 17, I guess, of those related specifically to CFLRP. And just getting back to some of the other services that we provide here, if I can, if my browser will jump back, maybe not. We do some technical assistance and referral type coaching processes for collaborative groups. So we have conducted several collaborative assessments where people are just thinking of starting a collaborative group, and they you know, kind of want to get the feel for if they're in the right environment for collaboration or not. We've also helped with several collaborative groups to just, you know, realign the collaborative with the agencies, specifically the Forest Service, since we are the National Forest Foundation. And so just helping to reestablish or realign those working relationships between the Forest Service and their collaborative groups. And then we also host and coordinate and facilitate various workshops related to collaboration or partnership. And that is about it for our website. Maybe I'll leave it there, John.
Great. Well, thanks, Ben. Really appreciate that. And what I'll do is want to go ahead and introduce our next panelist here, Tyson Bertoni-Riggs. And apologize for my spotty sound. I'm going to try to I've tried to switch things up a bit. Tyson works as a policy analyst for the Rural Voices for Conservation Coalition, focusing on federal land management policy, particularly related to the U.S. Forest Service. In addition to providing policy analysis, tracking, and engagement for the coalition, he's the author of Understanding Good Neighbor Authority, a guidebook intended to help practitioners and the public better understand the history and evolving use of this authority. Tyson holds a BA in Geography and Political Science from the University of Oregon and a master's degree from Oregon State University with a focus on federal land management policy and social science. So I'll go ahead and invite Tyson to go ahead and give a little overview of the work that RVCC does in supporting collaboratives.
Great, thanks, John. Yeah, so thanks for the invitation to the webinar. So John had hoped that I could pop on to offer a little bit of perspective on RVCC and some of the work that we do that might be of use to collaboratives. So I know some folks on the call, but for those of you who I don't know and who might not be familiar with RVCC, so Rural Voices for Conservation Coalition, we're a West-wide coalition that really works in the collaborative conservation space. We have a leadership team that's scattered throughout the West. In Idaho, some names that you might be familiar with, Chelsea Pennick-MacGyver, who looks like she's, or Chelsea Pennick rather, who's on our webinar. She is on our leadership team, as is Tony Ruth of Salmon Valley Stewardship. So the work that we do is a little bit, I guess, maybe one step removed from some of what a lot of collaboratives work on. So we're kind of, we deal with both the planning and the implementation space of projects. And we're really looking at policy and sort of peer learning exchanges, as well as a little bit of the storytelling component about the success of collaborative conservation. Overall, that work takes a couple of different forms, and any and all of this you can find on our website. For the policy component of it, it's really about explaining new tools and authorities and trying to make sure that folks who are working close to the ground have a sense of how those are working and how they can plug into them and utilize them. But at the same time, it's hearing how those tools and authorities are working for folks on the ground and bringing that back up to decision makers in DC. So we're really trying to keep sort of a full cycle of policy information. The peer learning component of it is often digging into particular programs, tools, or authorities. So again, details on how it works. And then also trying to do peer exchanges where we bring practitioners together across different geographies to share some of the ingredients of success that might have worked for their projects. And that really has of late had something of an all lands focus. So it's not just the planning side, it's also how it is that you get those projects out on the ground. So again, a number of the resources that we have on our website might focus a little more on the implementation tools than some of the collaborative conversations often focus on, but hopefully it's all useful. And then also from a policy standpoint, we're certainly tracking collaborative conservation generally, and so hopefully we're a useful resource for folks that would like to know more about emerging policy and some of the political conversations that are happening there. I think I might just leave it at that. It's kind of quick and dirty for RVCC, but I know I'll be on for the rest of the webinar to help answer questions if folks have them. Thanks, John.
You bet. Thanks, Tyson. And I wanted to introduce our last panelist here, and this is Sally Bernstein, who works with the Forest Program at Sustainable Northwest, and she provides support for forest collaboratives in Oregon and Washington. So we're getting a little cross-boundary collaboration happening today already. Sally leads the Oregon Forest Collaboratives Network, the Pacific Northwest Forest Collaboratives Annual Workshop, and facilitates and coordinates the Darrington Collaborative on the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest in Washington. Sally holds her Master's of Urban Regional Planning and graduate certificates in Energy Policy Management and Collaborative Governance from Portland State University. And welcome, Sally. We're glad to have you here join us today.
Thanks, John, and thanks for the invitation. I'll go ahead and share my screen here and have just a short PowerPoint. Okay, can everyone see that? Get full screen. So I'm Sally Bernstein. I work for Sustainable Northwest. Sustainable Northwest is a conservation nonprofit. We're based in Portland, Oregon, but we work in Oregon and Washington, and our Green Markets program works across the whole Northwest. So Alaska, California. I think they also have a couple of businesses in Hawaii. So they expand a little further, but primarily our work is in Oregon and Washington. We have 5 program areas. They all intersect: a forest program, rangelands, water, energy, and green markets. And we really work at the intersection of economy and environment and community. So I work in the forest program. I primarily spend my time in the public lands side of our program, with a little bit on the private, but today I'll talk about the public lands program. We provide 5 different services to collaboratives in Oregon and Washington. We do governance and decision support, facilitation and coordination, science engagement and delivery, connecting policy practice to policy, and we work a lot with Tyson and RVCC when in doing that. And then we have learning networks. Our audience for this is tribes, state agencies, national forests, the Forest Service, and the collaboratives. And then I have a little map here, as you can see. The blue is technical assistance, so where we're not necessarily on the ground all the time, but we're working closely. And the red is direct assistance, so we are spending significant time with these collaboratives. Not included is we have 2 statewide networks, the Oregon network and the Washington network. And in the past, the Washington network has been open to anyone and everyone in the Washington Forest Collaborative field or world. And this year it's become a lot more focused. It's just facilitators right now and meets monthly. The Oregon network is mirroring that, and it's sort of debuting this year. We haven't had it previously. I'm coordinating that, and so those 2 networks aim to bring facilitators and coordinators from each of the collaboratives together to get a better feel for what's happening statewide. And so when John asked me here today, he asked to talk about resources that we provide. In particular, he found our remote guide for collaboration that we published in April, sort of right when the pandemic hit. And we had questions immediately asking how collaboratives could adjust to this new virtual world. That I think I can share it out afterwards, but I think at this point, the information is a little bit outdated. We talked about what Zoom and Teams are and the different platforms for switching to remote meeting. I'm planning on updating that guide to best suit our needs today, which we're a lot deeper in this virtual world. And so it'll be great to interview some folks and see how remote collaboration is going and where and what best is, or what sort of the best practices are for keeping that going over the next year or however long we're in this. Next, our Forest Collaboratives Workshop. We have an annual 2-day event. Went virtual this year, just like everything else. It turned into a webinar series that lasted from May to October with about 2 webinars a month. Each of those were recorded and are available on our website if anyone's interested in watching them. It's kind of because it switched to a virtual platform, it's kind of become a network in itself. So anyone on that listserv who has previously attended that workshop is now going to receive updates on remote collaboration during COVID and may continue onwards. We'll see how that evolves. We put out a summer update, which built on the guide and talked about remote field trips. And then we're going to plan on another brief winter update, probably December or January. So that's where I'm going to end today. If you have any questions, let me know. My contact information is right on that last slide.
That's great. Thank you so much, Sally. And I'm going to ask folks to please post your questions in the chat. And I had a couple questions that I wanted to go ahead and just prime. And this is kind of a background. We've all had some examples of obviously work in the collaborative field. This is also new to a lot of people as well. One of the challenges is, as we're looking at the shared stewardship program, we really need to try to bring more people to the table and how to reach out to folks that, are outside of the, Forest Service boundaries. And these are our neighbors, the ranchers, the folks who live down in the valley, local businesses. How do we get them to the table, particularly if they don't even know what a collaborative is or how that works? So one challenge is to try to create a bigger table, get more folks involved, and get them up to speed on what this collaboration is about. So a question for the panelists, as folks come to the table or there's an issue that comes up, when would you advise folks to pursue a collaborative approach? And also, when would you on board, and other times where it might be, there might be other, it might not be quite right for that. And I just wanted to open up for any panelists, anyone who wants to take that on.
Maybe I can start on that. Interested to hear what the other panelists had to say. I think from my perspective, when to head towards a collaborative approach would be, I think, when you have a lot of interested stakeholders that, you know, feel like they have the time to put into collaboration, because we all know collaboration takes time and takes effort from a lot of different individuals. And, you know, I think have gotten to the point, maybe possibly in conflict, where they understand it's better to work together to problem solve than to pursue individual interests and you know, kind of keep fighting from different angles. So I think that's what I'd start with.
Great.
Yeah,
Any other
I would just
panelists?
agree. I think that that's well said. That's what I found in my experience, and so I'd echo what Ben said.
I guess the only thing I'd add on there is that, you know, there's sort of, people will talk about big C and little c collaboration. And so it can take different forms, and it maybe depends on what stage in a given project or a given effort you're in. You know, having a group come and participate routinely at a collaborative table might not always be feasible. But if you want to include private landowners, that's inevitably something of a collaborative process of reaching out through the community. So yeah, I guess be flexible and think about the different kinds of approaches it can take.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, Tyson, that thinking about what your objectives are through the process, I think that will help determine whether you're big C or little c.
I guess one more thing, I mean, in the context of shared stewardship and kind of expanding the table, as John indicated, there's already a lot of collaborative tables out there in Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Washington, and elsewhere. And so, you know, I think one thing I've been seeing is just more of a need for collaboratives to be reaching out to partners, maybe that wouldn't be sitting at the table every month at a collaborative meeting, but they want to stay involved in a particular project, a shared stewardship project, most specifically. And so just building those networks of partnerships between collaboratives and landowners or other interests that, you know, might want to pop into a meeting here or there, or might be focused on a particular project that the collaborative is engaged in, particularly in the realm of shared stewardship.
That's great. I had another question, and again, feel free to use the chat to post questions in. What are the most common issues that you deal with in terms of when a collaborative is collaborating and inevitably, you know, issues arise? And what are those issues in general, and how do you navigate them? So when you come up with something, and again, collaboratives are supposed to be, you know, pretty safe forums to bring up issues and to hash them out in a constructive manner. What are those issues and that most frequently come up, and how do you deal with them?
I mean, I think it depends on the collaborative and the topic and how long they've been working together. There's a lot of different things that will go into this. I think having a strong foundation and governance, it can always help. Having things that you can point to for accountability. I think, again, it depends on what the conflict is, and that varies amongst collaboratives. I think it's just a matter, I mean, it varies from east side to west side, from maturity of the collaboratives. There's a lot of different things that could be impacting it. And I think there's not necessarily one that arises for me generally, but I'd be interested to hear what others have to think.
I guess I'd add that, you know, I won't claim to be a collaboration specialist. And so I don't know that I can offer a lot in the way of sort of internal process of how you can overcome conflict. But I think it's worth recognizing that I think a lot of us who have spent time in the collaborative space, we can tend to think of the collaborative table as being sort of the sum total of the world, right? And really, there are problems that it may not be on the collaborative to come to agreement on. And I don't know that we need to think of collaboration as being the venue in which every single problem is solved, nor necessarily being the venue which really, you know, sort of deserves some finger pointing if projects don't quite come together in the way that we hope. And so I know for RVCC, part of our interest in a focus on implementation beyond just the planning phase is that we feel like we've seen a lot of examples of collaborative groups coming together and really wrestling with and overcoming some pretty thorny problems. That tends to be reflected in the planning side, and then finding the implementation partners and funding to accomplish the full suite of restoration that people are interested in can be sometimes a harder and really sort of separate challenge. So, I guess that's just to say, maybe it's not the end of the world if collaboratives can't agree on everything, but you can certainly find common ground and work from there, and then try to see that project really come to completion.
I guess I take a slightly different angle and say, I think in a lot of collaborative groups, when you're starting a collaborative groups, one of the big things is, oftentimes you're dealing with latent conflict that was in that area, or in the in the community regarding forestry issues in particular, and people need to learn how to collaborate. And so I think getting to the table and learning how to work together is oftentimes an issue that the collaboratives face, especially at the beginning. And then I think collaboratives can also face issues down the road in a similar fashion when usually through oftentimes through poor communication, where they just need to, where you have kind of a breakdown of that goodwill, and you need to kind of reestablish, who does what, why did this happen, just kind of clear the air of that latent conflict that can sometimes exist out there.
So Ben, I appreciate that, and this kind of goes back to the governance and organizational structure. Do you have that foundation for that communication and that understanding of each of the roles, what success looks like? So I think that's a good example. And then a question from that came up in the chat is, how can collaborative groups measure success with supporting acceleration of the pace and scale of restoration? And how can they tell that their work is making a difference on the landscape with this goal? And also, I don't know if this is possible. We've got I'm really overwhelmed with the number of collaborative experts on this call, and all the folks who are dialing in, and so a lot of those folks might have some ideas too. So if we get to have a chance, maybe Elizabeth, to let some folks, other folks that are our keynote panelists weigh in too, that could be helpful. Again, a question of how can collaboratives tell that their work is making a difference on the landscape in terms of accelerating the pace and scale of restoration?
I could take a first stab at that. Yeah, it's a big question. It's a question of interest to a lot of different parties. I think we can look at it from a couple of different angles. And John, to your point about a number of specialists being on this call, if Chelsea is interested in saying a few words, she has a fairly recent publication looking at specifically this. And I won't pretend to represent it particularly well, but I think one of the things that stood out to me is that it's not just a pace and scale question, it's also a complexity of the projects that collaborative groups undertake. And so it could be that collaboration does result in a faster pace and scale. There's some sort of anecdotal evidence for that. Beyond, and Chelsea's work, I believe, does in fact point to that. CLFRP also has had sort of outsized results for the amount of money that's gone into that program. So again, inherently collaborative, but also it's important, I think, to look at the complexity of the projects, the number of partners that are involved, and some of those things that might be a little less tangible than acres, but are still important.
And I would invite, if anyone who is on our call today wants to chime in on this one, feel free to use your participant button. You can click on that and use your raised hand feature. I'm keeping an eye out, so I will invite you into our conversation if you have any additional insight.
So I would also point folks to the work that Chelsea has been doing, and she's got a great presentation that has a lot of valuable material for just even kind of framing up how you go about thinking about measuring results on the ground from collaborative groups. You know, I'll say I'm a little bit more focused on measuring results as far as relationships built and efficiency of the collaborative group to work together and come into agreement and develop a decision space. So I'm not sure how much I can really speak to how that translates on the ground, although I do think, you know, it's often important to remember that in the collaboration world, as you progress over time, sometimes it's going fast going slow to go fast later often pays off in dividends.
Yeah, I'd echo that, Ben, and I think that's a similar space to where I work, more on the social side than the acres of it all. I would just add that I think the small wins along the way during that slow process really adds up to success later on, and you can almost count those little wins as success. I think that if the collaborative is working well together, there's general agreement, even if there's disagreement, the more you can keep things moving, I think that's success in itself. So I would just offer, it's hard to put metrics or really say that or check a box for success when we're talking about the collaborative process.
And Chelsea, I see your hand up. Did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think everybody's covered, you know, the topic really well. I appreciate folks pointing to the study that we recently released. If folks want to look at it, it's on our website at the policy analysis group at the University of Idaho. But just to reiterate, I think, you know, what we did is we really took kind of a meta look at collaboratives across the state of Idaho. And I would say, honestly, that the audience was probably much more towards land managers than it was towards answering questions for collaboratives themselves, because those are questions that have to be grappled with by individual participants and the groups themselves to determine whether they feel like they're having the success and the impact that they want to have. So, you know, we weren't necessarily trying to replace that, but just add to it maybe. And again, to sort of point towards land managers and help reinforce the importance of collaboration and the dedication of time and resources by agencies towards those efforts.
I'd also just add, it's helpful to, like, as a facilitator, collaborative facilitator, it's helpful to remember to, you know, every once in a while, I think annually is good. Just work with a collaborative group to reflect back on, you know, what has been accomplished in the previous year, and use that to help frame up where you're going to head in the future and how you can improve, and use that kind of adaptive management cycle.
Just a question for the panelists, and actually anyone else who would like to chime in. Curious when a collaborative surprised you in a good way, when you're all facilitating or tracking or supporting collaboratives, and when has a collaborative kind of effort surprised you, if at all, and did something that where the whole really was more than the sum of the parts? Just curious if there's any examples that folks have with that.
I can start. I can think of lots. Let's see. Kind of going way back in my collaborative experience, I worked with the Bighorn National Forest and local stakeholders in Wyoming. Their forest plan was out of, and I think actually still is, out of compliance with the roadless rule due to some timing issues when their forest plan came out. And so they wanted to form a collaborative group to help kind of resolve those issues at the local level, the conflict between the roadless rule and their forest plan. And I was surprised. We gave it 1 year to bring people together and have them go over all the roadless parcels on the forest and decide whether they thought it was, you know, it should indeed be roadless. categorized as roadless or not, and then, you know, figure out kind of what category to put that part in. And it was a lot of work, and I don't think anybody thought we could do it in a year, but in the end, we were able to come to some consensus recommendations on those roadless parcels, including, you know, members of the Wyoming Wilderness Association and local timber companies, et cetera, a nice broad swath of the stakeholders.
I'll jump in. I can't think of a specific example off the top of my head here, but something that surprised me recently, and I'm just going to tie this back to the resources for collaboration topic objective here today. When the pandemic hit and we were doing our research for that guide, it was, I think, surprising to us to see sort of the resiliency of collaboratives and how so many of them had already started to switch to virtual platforms and had continued their conversations and their work. I think that collaboration is tricky, and it's a very in-person, you kind of need that in-person thing to build trust and to talk together and drink together and make it happen. And so it was surprising in a good way to see that things were at least moving forward in a somewhat positive and optimistic way. There are definitely challenges, but that was great to see.
An example I think that folks may already be familiar with, but when this is a work on the Payette National Forest, when a decision came out from the on the Middle Fork Weezer River project, and some of the folks from the Payette are well familiar with this, but the project received objections from groups kind of to the left and kind of to the right. The collaborative wanted to be part of those discussions, and so the collaboratives submitted a support. Pretty good balance. If there's any changes, we want to be at the table. And independent of the formal objection resolution process, the collaborative reached out to the other objectors, first individually, and then actually got them all in the same call at the same time to sort things out. And we realized that the other objectors, even from different perspectives, actually were not at cross purposes. And so we kind of said, well, can you live with this? Can you live with this? And then when the Forest Service hosted the objection resolution meeting, we kind of all had a solution in the back pocket that we had worked on to suggest to the Forest Service that minimized the back and forth because we'd already worked out. And as a result, the Forest Service rolled up the sleeves, did some additional work, and all objections were fully withdrawn from that decision, so the project could proceed without concern of litigation. And that was just a nice. I was really proud of the work that the objectors, the coalition, the Forest Service did to resolve that. And I, you know, that was something that we've also tried to do in other example situations as well.
I'll give another quick one. The Beaverhead Deer Lodge working group that I work with out of Butte, Montana. Oh, I don't know when it was, maybe a year and a half or so ago. There was some proposed legislation to kind of deal with all of Montana's wilderness study areas. And it was causing, I guess, tensions to flare up within the group. And, you know, the group decided to, you know, have a dedicate, you know, an hour and a half discussion to just trying to hash out what they wanted to do to deal with that. I think there's two of those wilderness study areas are on the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest. And eventually they decided that they weren't gonna go near it because they were worried that if they addressed that proposed legislation that in a collaborative way, that it could do real damage to the way the collaborative was functioning. They didn't think that they could, the goodwill and the relationships between people could go through something like that, which I thought was very self-aware of the group as a group, and it surprised me.
That's great. That's good to kind of figure out. That might be too much for us to take on, and that'll not maybe serve us well in the long run. Now, one of you had mentioned earlier how to maybe do host successful virtual field trips or field trips on your own. So the big benefit, as I see collaboratives, is when y'all, get around and you look at you walk through a project area, you're seeing the same things, you're looking at the same things and seeing the same things and learning from each other, kind of in that classic big circle around the pickup trucks. And now it's like that might not be possible in the same way we did it. How do we host virtual field trips? Do you give everyone a map and say, go off on your own and look at this map? Any ideas of how to so folks can still get out in the field and have that dialogue, but in this kind of COVID setting? Any suggestions for managing field trips?
Or I can start out. I've seen a couple different examples. Some people, I mean, my collaborative for the Darrington Collaborative actually did host a in-person field trip. I think it depends on where you are, what county you are, and your level of comfort. We just did it in a very small way. So we had a representative of each of the interests attend, and some Forest Service staff, but there was a maximum of 8 people. Everyone drove their own car, wore a mask the whole time. And then we had them all take notes and take a lot of photographs, and we're going to translate that into a story map for a wider audience, as well as the rest of the collaborative. I've seen other collaboratives really just I've seen a lot of story maps. I think I think that's a great way to create a field trip for your collaborative, but also use it for a collaborative collateral later on. It's a great way to tell your story and what you're working on.
You said a collaborative collateral later
collateral,
on?
yeah. So you can use it to show what you're working on. You can use it later on. You can use it for your field trip. You can use it for a long time. It's a great thing to make and a tool to have. I've also seen collaboratives use drone footage and go out and watch video of that together. So there's a lot of different creative ways you can go about it. It doesn't necessarily feel that like in person, you're there in the woods together, but at least it's something.
That's great. Ben?
Well, the ideas are popping just sitting here listening to Sally. I think those are all great ideas, which I haven't tried, but would love to figure out how to implement. I know some collaboratives that I've worked with are, talking about having that kind of virtual, having a bunch of GPS waypoints, and then the Forest Service having like a description of what they're for each waypoint, having like a little bit of narrative to go along with that, to do that, whenever you feel comfortable, head out there and have a look kind of feel, which I think would be good. We've talked about, just getting a caravan of cars and going out there. I'd love to try something like that. I mean, I know it's kind of resource intensive, but and maybe having some radios and be able to have that kind of more of the kick the tires type experience with your fellow collaborative members. I would also, maybe put some folks that I see here on the spot. I know the Panhandle Forest Collaborative has been talking about getting out on a field trip to a new project, and I haven't really followed along, but I think Liz and Phil, if you guys have done any field trips and have some comments, I think that'd be valuable for folks to hear.
Hey everyone, this is Liz. I know they went out last week, Ben. You're talking about the Rosie Cedar project, I believe. And it was a small group, as Sally suggested. And I was not able to make it, but they took some excellent notes and now have passed that on to the Forest Subcommittee. And we will discuss it and then bring it to the larger group. I think the drone idea is actually really cool, because I've used that in different projects as well with some of the school kids to teach them things. And I really liked that suggestion, Sally. I think that's a good one.
That's great. Hey, we're wrapping up, coming up on the top of the hour here. Some folks have to head off, and that's fine. Just curious if folks had any other last questions or parting thoughts of wisdom as we all kind of go back to our own little, collaboratives and things coming up in the coming weeks. Any other closing questions or thoughts of wisdom?
I guess I would just share with folks, I think these cross-pollination opportunities are really great for collaboration. And I think, picking up the phone and calling folks you see here on the screen to ask follow-up questions is a great way to keep the conversation going.
That's great. Well, with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. I just want to thank our panelists and everyone for joining us, and also everyone for doing such a great job in your own communities to bring folks together. And so we are all, we all have a role in this. And I think that it is I've been impressed with what folks can do when they come together. And also there's been an interesting development from collaboratives I hadn't anticipated, in that you're focused on your charter, your mission, all these things. But then something else comes up out of the blue, maybe something completely unrelated. But now I know who to pick up the phone and call and talk about that and get their perspective from it and get out of my bubble. And so I think there's benefits for collaboratives outside of your little project area you're working on of having that type of relationship and discussions. So let's keep the conversation going. So if you haven't already registered or are tracking IFRP websites or emails, go ahead and sign up there. And look for other webinars coming from IFRP. And also, please check out the resources that our panelists provided today. So with that, and we'll go ahead and post this webinar on the IFRP website. And I want to thank everyone for coming today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.